The first thing I really want to talk about today is, what does your team want, right? So go in the chat. What do you think your team wants? What do you think they really, really want from you as a manager? And by the way, if you're a rep, put in there what you want. Let's just see what people have to say. Come on, it's way more fun if it's interactive, folks. I promise. Vision, money, alignment, support, be heard. Luke, love it. All right, well, this is what your team wants. They want money. They need purpose, comfort. Comfort means consistency. And what that really means to me is not this constant whipping back and forth that can happen. Oftentimes, the most common place it happens is compensation. Every quarter it changes, every year it changes, all those kinds of things. So I want to make sure people understand that. By the way, as you have questions around this, put them into the Q&A. Like every slide we bring up, we want to do live Q&A. So, hey, Richard, what do you mean by that? Or, hey, Richard, I want to share this. Or, hey, I've got this weird situation with my upper management. We'll anonymize you, by the way. So all that kind of stuff. They want mentoring. This one's really, really interesting. I just discovered this. I can't remember if it was like Gartner or Harvard Business Review. Somebody mentioned that people want mentoring. They don't want feedback. Right? Now, they want that mentoring in the form. Feedback can be used to mentor someone. And I really thought that really just sent a light bulb off of me. I just read this like a month ago and I was like, oh, this is so good, because we constantly are tactically minded in my mind as leaders so often. So what does mentoring mean? It means that you got to be vulnerable. You've got to share your wins. You got to share your losses. It doesn't mean you have to open up about a personal thing if you don't want to. I've talked about mental health for years now. I talk about how my depression is my superpower and what I've had to do, and that I'm lucky in the sense that, I was never one to hurt myself or hurt anybody else. I just had sadness, but I talk about it because I also know how to talk about it when it hits my numbers. If I don't hit my numbers, I posted a couple of years ago, throwing up a big fat 0. I went live with it on LinkedIn. That's scary shit, right? Like nobody really is told to do that. So vulnerability helps. My hunch is that if you know who I am and you've seen the things I do talk about negative things, not in a critiquey way, but like, hey, this stuff happens. So sometimes I use it in a humorous way. So, so vulnerability, talking about your successes is good. Talking about a lesson you learned, talking about a lesson. I get lessons from my kids' sports teams all the time. I'll bring that stuff in and write about it. And they want the truth, even if it's harsh, right? Like even Mikey, I was joking around and poking at him, but I'm like, dude, you got to tighten that up, But
hey, I appreciate the truth.
And I'd be willing to bet, Mikey, am I the first person to ever tell you that?
100%. You are.
No, come on, that's not possible.
Most of them like the thorough kind of introduction, making sure everyone.
I didn't say you need to be thorough. I just meant go faster.
Okay.
Yeah. So, hey, but look, noted. Mikey and I are having an honest dialogue here. Like that's the point. Like, by the way, Mikey, if I've offended you, call me out.
Whatsoever. It's actually great feedback. I appreciate it.
And then people want their jobs to be easier. So we're going to dive into that in terms of what does that really mean. So I'm curious from people on the chat. I don't know if there's anything in the Q&A. What did I miss? What are other things that people want, either you want from your leadership or that your team wants from you? I love Michael, what you said, stuff that works. And I love, Luke, what you said, to be heard and recognition, right? So a couple of thoughts. So for me, money and purpose drive to recognition. If I'm making money, hopefully I'm getting some level of recognition. If I have purpose, I'm getting that. And I think that consistency piece. So if I'm wrong on that, Luke, by all means, call me out on it. Won't offend me. Stuff that works. Michael, what kind of things, if you're comfortable saying, what do you mean stuff that works? Feel free to go into the chat while we do that. Mikey, what do you think you want from your managers? You've been in this role.
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it in terms of money, purpose, and then comfort and consistency, right? So what I want from a manager is I want them to enable me to be the best I can be, right? If they're doing that properly, right? That could be going on to Michael's stuff that works, processes, um, you know, making sure we have the right tech stack in place, whatever it is, to be able to succeed, then that will drive compensation, and then it'll drive comfort and consistency because we have the right processes in place to follow. And then for me, one of the biggest things is the purpose piece, where getting recognized and seeing how I'm actually impacting an organization in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
That is, I think, one of the biggest things for me. Obviously, I do want to be compensated for the efforts I'm putting in, but one of the biggest things is getting that recognition for what I have achieved, and that goes a long way for me.
I think you're right, and I appreciate you chiming in on that. Did you ever get bad advice? How many people got? I got bad advice from managers. Hell, I probably gave bad advice when I was an old school manager. I was the, hey, here's 2 days of product knowledge. Here's a day of sitting next to Bob on the phone. Bob didn't really make calls or get anybody to answer. And then it was STFU. Here's your book. Go for it. Like that was kind of it. And I taught that. It was terrible. So what are some of the bad advice people have gotten? Because I think that's goes along to what Michael's saying. Never leave your training to your trainer. Oh, Nick, I love this. Nick, if you guys don't know Nick, by the way, super smart guy, really fun. Doing some stuff on TikTok, by the way.
So to go off of what Nick just said there, I had an experience where at a previous company, I didn't really, let's say, not naming anything, trust the training I had, right? Or in terms of, it was an outbound process that we were doing. I didn't think it was going to be the most effective. So ultimately, that's when I turned to Sales Hacker. And then I started utilizing some of the best practices of Sales Hacker, and then ultimately kind of revamped the outbound process for then, and then started kind of teaching that, right? So I love that point, Nick. That's great.
I agree. And I love what Michael says too, because he's digging into it specifically. He wants to know exactly what to say, right? Generating quality leads. So, Michael, this is a hashtag blame Richard. Depending on your definition of generating leads, that's not your job. Someone else at the organization needs to be giving you name, contact, phone number, business, title, email, all that stuff. If someone's paying you to do research like that, and I don't know if that's what you meant, I don't know, find another job. I'm sure somebody here is hiring. By the way, everybody can go in there and say, hey, I'm hiring, and whoever wants a job can reach out to them. Mention your company name. So let's make this good for everybody. But I agree with you, moving the deals forward, right? So I'm going to give you one tip, Michael, and this is for everybody. Oftentimes, we're taught to figure out access to authority, right? We're taught to figure out, well, who's going to make the decision? Well, the problem is that 99% of the time, it's not one person. Even if they say it's one person, they're always getting advice. Look, I can't go spend $5,000 without talking to my wife. I probably wouldn't spend $500 without talking to my wife. Maybe different on the other side. She may do what she wants, but that's how it works. These are the jokes, people. They're not getting better, I promise. So here's the question I encourage you. When you think you have a champion, when you think you're talking to someone, say, hey, Mikey, when you go back to your team, because I know that's what you're going to do, who's going to be the most skeptical on your team? That's a great sales question, because once you figure out the skeptic, then you can figure out what to do. Now, you can also do the same thing as a manager and a leader. Hey, who on my team is going to be the most skeptical when I try to bring something forward? And then you figure out, well, how do I work with that person? Because that's the part of management people will talk about. We hear it of like, hey, you manage the group and you coach the individual and all that kind of stuff. I can't remember what that crazy line is, but it's the same thing. Who's the most skeptical on your team? And how do you work with them and get them on your side sooner, or at least acknowledge them, which goes back to recognition of saying, hey, you've been here a long time. I want to try this. Do you think it'll work? What do you think? and at least you got their opinion. So these are the little things you can do from a management and leadership perspective. I can't see the questions. Do we have any questions yet, Mikey?
Not quite yet, man.
All right, come on, people. Let's get some questions going.
Get them in the Q&A here.
By the way, this is the last thing they want. They want to get out of their job most of the time. They want to get promoted. They want to get more money. So if you can find those lifers who are happy, and there are plenty of them, there are definitely SDRs who love just owning that piece. There's definitely AEs who just want to carry the bag. They don't want to go to management. Hang on to those people, but ask them, why do you like staying here? Why don't you want to go to those things? Not that you're trying to encourage them, but hear them out. That's, again, being heard, letting them be heard, letting them know you understand their persona and what they want. Right? When people come to you and say, hey, I want to get promoted and it's 3 months. Great. What do you want to do? What do you think's cool about being promoted? What do you think's great about being in leadership? Because it ain't all fun. Right? If they want to do that, give them the shitty jobs you got to do. You got a report you got to run, ask them to help. Show them this is part of management. Test them. Right? When they say, hey, I want to be promoted in 3 months, great. What would you change? What are you going to do? What's your mantra? Now, don't be as snarky as I am here. Please be polite. You know, if you need to learn politeness, you can go to Mikey or maybe Nick. So
I gotta figure out gotta cut down the politeness here.
Yeah. All right. I'll stop picking on you so much. So, and by the way, I love what Shwanda just wrote. You as a leader, one of the greatest things that you can show is how many people got promoted underneath you. And it's never on a resume and it's never on a LinkedIn profile. Before I went into this business, I had a running tally of about 120, and I'm a little older than most people. 120 people got promoted under me. What does that say about me as a leader? It shows me that I care. If the people I'm recruiting see it and they go, oh, this guy's gotten 120 people promoted. Wow, that might be somebody I want to learn from. Doesn't mean I was perfect, by the way. Believe me, I got plenty of people who didn't get promoted and they probably didn't like me. So it's really important that these are the little things you can do and make sure you understand. When they say, I want to be promoted, great. Have them sell you on it. Great. Well, what do you think is going to be good? What do you like about being in charge, do you think? What do you think is going to suck? Tell them to do some research. Go research it. Tell me what it means to be a sales leader. Let's talk about it. Rather than this sort of, hey, well, we don't do that until 6 months later, blah, 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 right? Like, have the conversation.
Yeah,
all right.
I love what you just said there, Richard, honestly, because I've been in both situations on either side of the coin. And well, that's what made me leave a company, is because it was just like, all right, we'll do this in this time. And then I would do everything. And then it's like, no, we'll do it in this time. And then I would do everything. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm leaving to another company that will.
But did you learn something, Mikey? What'd you learn out of that? Because I agree with you.
I think I learned a lot. I think I learned that it's just, I think it's kind of understanding the people that are leading you and seeing, like, I could have probably gotten out earlier if I had seen the signs with other people that had been there for 5 years and knew the kind of process, who I asked, and they said, yeah, it could continuously look like this, but I kept being optimistic. So I think I learned a lot about, instead of just going with, okay, I'll do this and expect to be promoted, then also kind of have something in place on their end to hold them accountable. Which is what I thought was, is something I will take with moving forward.
So, Mikey, I'm going to put words in your mouth, right?
Yeah.
So tell me if this is what you learned. One, you learned how to determine goals and hit them. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. You determined through time what trust means with your management team.
To an extent, yes.
What do you mean to an extent?
I just feel like, I still towards the end, didn't fully trust them.
But because of that, you now know what trust looks like.
You're right. Yes.
Because you know what trust doesn't look like.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Precisely,
Yeah. That this is the mind stuff we got to teach ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Is that even when we talk about it, oh, you learn from your failures. Well, we're not gravitating to that, right? There's a doctor, I can't remember, I think it's coming up, but I'm not going to say it yet. But you learned that. You also went out and learned how to do whatever it is they asked you to do.
Mm-hmm.
You learned how to report back in a functional way, to report up to people. Like, hey, you asked me to do this. Here's how I did it. Here are my accomplishments. So you got a lot of good skills out of it. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be just, that's like, woohoo, I got screwed over. No, you're allowed to be disappointed. You're human. I just, when you get that perspective, when you have time and you can step away emotionally from it, it's like, wait a minute, they did teach me a lot. Like, I didn't have an abusive father. He was just sort of ignoring of me. But he was certainly never hurtful or an alcoholic or any of those kinds of things. But I am a good father and husband in spite of my father, because I know what bad fathering was like. Took me a lot of therapy to get there, but so in some ways I kind of have to love him even more and thank him for showing me a path not to go down.
Got it.
So anyway, so I want to go ahead and move forward. We got a question.
We do.
We got about 4 questions. I call this the triple barrel loaded question. So sales managers are they needed at all? Are they not serving the company more than the sellers most of the time? Most managers last 15 months in tech these days. Should the manager not be creating self-supervising entrepreneurs? Ooh, I love this. We're going to get to it in the coaching section, Michael. Great question. Are they needed? Absolutely, they are. However, they need more autonomy. They need to be held. They need to be allowed to be accountable for their strengths and their weaknesses and their mistakes and their successes. That's the problem. I do agree with you on the last 15 months. Look, everything's a little crazy, right? And I see it differently, but I'm not on the front line. So keep calling me out. If the companies are still expecting that of the managers, and the managers are acting in that way, which again, from the way you asked the question, Michael, felt negative, then it's time to find a new manager, a new company. Sorry, and the best part is not that hard these days. I still haven't seen anybody put in there, hey, I'm hiring, which is interesting. So
we got one more in the chat if we want to.
Yeah, well, is it
now? So it just James asked, how do you deal with the situation where one team member constantly brings negativity to the group and impacts the overall morale of the
Yeah, it's a great question, right? They're the cancerous rep. Just out of curiosity, James, are they the most successful as well? Because sometimes that's what happens. Definitely not. Okay, James, you have to coach them. It's time for you to have a one-on-one that's a serious conversation that goes something like this. Hey, James, I've noticed in these situations, you've done this 3 times. And it's really affecting the team, man. Like, how are you doing? Is something going on in your life, in your world, where maybe, there's just some negativity going on? So first you can sort of listen to them. And they may or may not open to you, James. They may not. That's okay. And then you need to be able to say, hey, James, and maybe instead of saying it this way, could you try it this way next time? And could you try it this way next time? So now you're just having a conversation and you're coaching them and you're being a leader and you're being empathetic and you're doing all that kind of stuff. And that's the goal in my mind. So, again, I don't know if that's going to be the right thing. And then at some point, James, fire the fucker. I don't care. Fire them. If they're that negative and they're not performing, why are you having them around? Right? Now, I get it that it's, hard to find people. Well, that now becomes a compensation issue. Why is it so hard to find people for your organization? But if they're that negative and they're causing that much stress, and here's what's going to happen, your team's going to go, about fucking time. You're going to go, thank God you did that. And you're going to see them elevate. Right? Now, don't be mean. If you have to let someone go, I call it hugging them out the door, whatever your company's policies are. And sometimes you can say as a leader, hey, it's just not a good fit here, but that doesn't mean you're a bad salesperson. It just means it's not the right fit for you and it's not the right fit for us. It doesn't seem like everybody's happy. So let's move on. And it's okay to say that. And it's hard to say that sometimes. All right. There it is. Fire them. All right. Oh, it's supposed to take, here we go. So what does make a rep's job easier? What does effective leadership look like? This to me are those things. Now there's sub bullets under each of these. So I'm going to let, if you have a question around, well, hey, Richard, what do you mean by this? Or hey, can you dive deeper? Go ahead and pop that in the chat or in the questions. And again, did I miss anything? Right. So James, I want you to think about the best time you were a rep, right? Okay. And even a manager. At your best moment, at your highest peak, what were your leaders doing for you at that moment?
Hey, Richard, we got another question here from Karen.
Yep.
How do you handle going from being part of the team to being the team leader / manager and have to deal with an issue the current manager has let go? Example, 3 members of the team spend the first hour and a half socializing.
There are 2 ways to look at this, Karen. So one is you bring them in and you collectively have to say, look, everybody, I love the culture. Culture is important. This is not an acceptable expectation. So I think you have to redefine expectations in a professional way. You can do it as a group. You can do it as a individual one-on-one, or you could do it as a subgroup of these 3 people. Now, Karen, a question for you in the chat. Is everybody back in the office now and that's new, or has everybody been in the office for a while? See if we can get an answer. No, we've been in the back office for quite a while now. So here's the thing. I'd be curious, how many of you who are going back to the office, has anybody had the conversation of, hey, everybody, we're back in the office. As childish as this sounds, we need to kind of reset expectations of office behavior. Like my kids, we're in California, right? So, roll your eyes. My kids went back to school full time, this year, back in the fall. They hadn't been in a classroom in almost 18 months. Riley was in 7th grade. Last time he was in a classroom was 5th grade. Like a lot happens to a boy or a girl in those ages, right? And it sounds so childish, but it's kind of needs to just be recognized. Like, you can't behave this way. My other son goes to a different school, and there were tons of disruptions. It's an all boys school, so it's a little bit different too, and they had to sit down and tell us. And then the funny thing was, they had to tell us as parents, hey, parents, remember, your kids haven't been in a structured classroom environment in a long time. You might need to notice these kinds of things at home, or you might hear these things. So give it time. So I think that's one thing you can do. Karen, I also think that you need to have a conversation with them. Like, here are the expectations. Like, hey, I want you to come in. I love the culture. Can you cut it to 15 minutes, right? Go to lunch together later, right? Like, just tell them what the expectation is, hopefully without trying to sound demanding, like, well, here are the expectations, and you better do this, and you better do that, you better do this, right? Like, I'm not soft and fuzzy, in case you couldn't tell. Other questions or comments around any of this stuff that we want to dig in on? Office behaviors have plummeted. Yes, completely agree. So good hygiene is non-negotiable. Yeah. If you have an HR department, by the way, this is exactly their job. 1000% their job to make this message out. And if they haven't, then shame on them, and hashtag blame Richard. So call Richard Harris. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and go forward just in the interest of time, but keep questions coming as we go through this stuff. Management mindset. Okay, this is the part that we have to do. And I think, Karen, you may be facing some of this. I don't know. When we get promoted within the same organization and we're managing who were our peers and now they report to us, that's awkward. It's different. Your relationship has changed. right? You may not be able to go out drinking and partying with everybody like you used to, right? Like it's just different. And so the faster you can set expectations of, hey, here's what I want to be as a manager. And you should go and look at what kind of management styles are out there. We're not getting into that. You know, there's autocratic managers, there's disciplinary managers, there's the laissez-faire manager, there's dashboard managers, there's the coaching man, like there's all kinds, and you can have more than one of those personalities. Go decide what you want to be and then tell your team and build your structure and your process around it so that you're being consistent with the message. And yeah, look, this is the key about management that nobody ever tells you. Sometimes you are God's greatest gift to human beings, and the very next day they might think you eat babies. Like it's that direct opposite. So those are the things you should be looking at. Numbers, pacing, get your ops as fast as possible, like dial it in faster than you can imagine. I believe in displaying in team and individual goals. This whole like, no, that's no, you have to show it. Like this is the game, right? Now I believe in there's some new compensation models out there where it's different, but that doesn't mean I still don't want to track who's doing what. So I want to make sure that there's transparency. Discuss performance improvements daily. This is a different meaning, like, hey, what did you do better today than you did yesterday? That doesn't mean you have to know it. It means they should know it. And they should get used to you coming around and asking them, hey, what did you do better today? What was one thing that went really well today, business-wise? It can be personal too. Like a friend of mine just closed a house. Like that's a pretty big deal. Like I know that, by the way, she's going to go into debt over a house, but that means she's going to be motivated to work harder. So I think that's really good. We're going to talk about effective one-on-ones in a second. Any questions or comments?
I got one here for myself. When we're talking about internal beliefs, how, saying from, as being a part of the team and talking to your manager and, getting through that, how have you been able to, or how would you recommend not altering their internal beliefs, but at least just, getting them to see a different viewpoint?
I'm not understanding the question, Mikey.
So we might be on different pages on what is meant by internal beliefs, but when you say internal beliefs, what do you mean by that? Because like sometimes.
Okay, great question. Sorry, I assumed everybody knew it, which was wrong. That means your own internal belief system.
Got it. Okay.
You got to know what you want. You got to know what kind of manager you want to be. You finally got that moment where it's like, all that stuff I've been asking for, I'm here. So if you haven't documented, like I used to have a document, it says, when I'm a manager, I'm gonna, and I would just write it down. And I've been trying to tell my boys, I want you to write a document that says, when you're a parent, you're gonna what? It lasted for about 3 days and then they forgot to write it down, but it's that mindset. And so now you have to come in and understand what it is you want. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's about learning for what motivated me the most, talking to my team to see what motivated them the most. But you're going to have to give yourself a permission mindset to be God's greatest gift and to eat babies. Because if you can't, it's just what's going to have to, you're going to lose your credibility as a leader.
Yeah. We have one more question before we move on, and we'll get going. But we have one saying, stepping into a leadership role with a company that already has an established SDR team. Any insight as to how to best build rapport quickly?
Yes, super simple. Get on the phones with them. Do the job with them. Sit with them. Send emails. Right? If you send an email and you set an appointment, spiff it off to somebody else. Hey, everybody, I just set an appointment. I'll give you credit for it if you get one by the end of the day. But they want to see and hear you do this all the time. Right? Now, that's the fastest way to build rapport. Now, going back to that vulnerability, you may have a crap day. You may sound like crap if you're new there. That's okay. So look, hey, you guys are all here one day. Tell me what I should do better. I mentioned this a while ago. I think this is a great idea to talk about, which is if you're using a recording software, send out your cold call or your discovery call or whatever it is to the team and say, hey, everybody, here's my call. What did I miss? Let them give you feedback, because we all miss something. Oh, I forgot to ask that. Oh, I forgot to ask that. Even me, like, here I am, the guru, but stuff happens. We're humans. That to me builds the most credibility fast and rapport, is doing the job and being vulnerable to show them that you're not perfect either. And you're going to keep going and you're going to keep trying. So that's the first thing. Second thing is make sure you define your expectations, have set routines, et cetera, which we're going to talk about in a second. Great question. I hope I said this, Shariah. I hope I said that right, Shariah. All right, let's go to effective one-on-ones. So, all right, best practices. These are the different types of one-on-ones. And it's super important that you recognize that all one-on-ones are not meant to be pipeline meetings. If all you do in a one-on-one is talk about revenue, you're not really having real one-on-ones. You can talk about pipeline. You can talk about the week ahead. You could technically talk about the week behind. Career conversations, life conversations, feedback to the manager. Maybe you need to get some feedback, right? You can do drive-by one-on-ones. You can, drive-by one-on-ones. Hey, what was the best thing that happened today? It's important. It's important that someone come and just say hello to you, particularly if you're in the office. So that's one thing, I think. There are different ways to do this, right? Like this is all about an adjust as necessary schedule. Sometimes the even weeks are personal, sometimes the odd weeks are business. The reason odd weeks are business is that always makes it means at least the first week of the month and the third week of the month are business related around revenue, so that you can drive towards whatever your goals may be. So that's one thought. 10-10 rule, just something I learned elsewhere. 10 minutes for them, 10 minutes for you, 10 minutes for the week ahead, depending on which type of one-on-one you're going to have. Make sure you include accountability. It's the one thing missing from all one-on-ones. Hey, at the end of this one-on-one, at the end of this, what are you going to do and what am I going to do? So those are the key pieces at the highest level. So by the way, we're going to go into a little bit more on structuring one-on-ones. I'm going to get super nitty-gritty with you. But if you see something that I missed, or you're like, hey, Richard, where would you do this? Or how would you do this? Or can you do business and personal in the same one? Like any of that stuff, go ahead and chime them into the chat or into the questions. So
I personally love what you said there, where it's even weeks, personal, odd weeks, business. I've never heard of that before. And I think that's a great approach to doing it, because when I used to have webinars at one-on-ones at previous companies, it would just be one-on-one. No agenda, no anything. And then we'd go in there.
By the way, I should put that in there. Their agenda is a best practice. Everybody should know their agenda, which we're going to see in a second. But
yeah.
Yes.
And then we would just sit there and chat. And then next thing you know, time's up and we got to go. And we didn't even really get through probably what was the most important things to talk about. Right. So
for you, Mikey, what do you think were the most important things as you recall these situations?
It was really just at different points. So sometimes I wanted to talk about, like you wrote down on the left there, different types, right? Sometimes I wanted to talk about my pipeline. Sometimes I wanted to just get some feedback. Sometimes I wanted to just talk about what's happening to me in my personal situation right now, which has affected my pipeline, right? Or X, Y, and Z. But it would always you always just go into it and we would chat a bit, talk about, what's
for leadership,
well, what's not. And then it just wasn't dialed in, which is what I would have liked. Right.
So here's my advice, because I've done that too. And I was told this is what people liked about me by my managers and my direct reports. When I was a rep before I became a manager and I had my one-on-ones, and I don't know why I did it, I would say, hey, Kenny, here's what I think I need to cover with you this week. If you've got something else, let me know. because I don't know what he's thinking. He may have something else he's done, but I know what I need. I know as a rep what I need. Same thing as a manager. Hey, Rock, yeah, that's his name. Here's what I want to cover with you in our one-on-one this week. I want to talk about the team performance here. I want to talk about this particular person. I want to talk about, I think we need this tool or service. If there's something you need to bring up, let's be sure we cover it. And that to me shows leadership. It also tells my boss that I'm trying to make his or her job easier by not making them come up with everything for me, because nobody knows me better than me ever. Right? Mm-hmm. That's just the way the world works. So,
and to add to that, that is kind of what the current situation is, right? This is what we have. This is what I have. Let's get through it.
Yep. And so for me, whoever you are, whether you're everything from an SDR, player coach to, by the way, I hate that role, player coach. Contact me offline if we need to talk about it. You can hashtag blame Richard. Richard says that's a terrible role, unless you love it. But go to your meetings prepared yourself for what you need and want. It's also okay to say, hey, I'm not sure what I want to do this week or what I need to focus on. Here's my pipeline. I think I'm good. Here's where my deals are. I think I'm good. Hey, what do you see? Now your manager's going to have to sit there and figure out your pipeline. Maybe he will, or she will look at a couple of deals. Right? So that's just, you be prepared. You set the agenda for the one-on-one, not the management team. All right. So if you are a leader, I get super micromanaging. Some people call it coaching. So if someone had handed this to me when I was a manager at 25, I'd have rolled my eyes. This is what I think you need to do. You need to have it by minute, if you're a leader, what you're going to do. I might even adjust and put it above intro of discussion. I might even put the word agenda, which might overlap with intro of discussion. So I might even put in there from 0 to 1 minute. What is going on? How is life? And again, as you see this is just me trying to get people to think about what you could cover. You don't have to do it 0 to 2 or 2 to 5 minutes or 5 to 11. I just want you to think about those 30 minutes as a leader and as an individual and say, what's going to maximize my goals and performance from this dialogue? And if you can't, then it's a question, do you need the meeting? Nobody's asked this one yet, I don't think, but sometimes people will say, hey, does everybody need a one-on-one every week? So I'm going to answer that question, even though it wasn't asked, which is, it depends, right? If I've got super senior reps who don't need a lot of my coaching and they don't want it, and there's enough trust there that I trust their pipeline and their forecast and those things, I might go every other week. I might tell them, hey, I'm keeping our times on the calendar, dead time for either one of us. If you don't want the meeting, that's okay. And then I would also say, but we have to meet twice a month. We have to. I can't not do it twice a month. Because otherwise something will go wrong. And by the time you know about it, it's too late. Questions, comments around this? By the way, you can make this into 45 minutes. So it's 15, 15, and 15 as you do things like this, or you build out your timeline. Questions or feedbacks around the one-on-ones? Anyone? I love what Daryl's saying. Yes, one-on pipeline review meetings, needs to be separate, in my opinion. Totally separate. How are we doing on time? Oh, good, we got time.
Got 14 minutes here.
Questions, comments on one-on-ones? Mikey, I love how you said it was just terrible one-on-ones. And believe me, I did that too. Here's the one thing I'm going to give you one more piece of advice. If you're running one-on-ones as a management, don't ever change them on the calendar. I don't care if the Pope calls. If the Pope calls and says, can you meet Tuesday at 4? You know what, Pope? I got a meeting. Can I do 4:30? Now, the Pope may say, no, you can't. I need you. It's an emergency. Great. Okay, no problem. Granted, yes, if it was the Pope, I'd probably take the call, but I think everybody knows what I mean. If the CEO asks for the meeting, you don't take it and adjust your one-on-one. Your CEO should be very proud when you say, hey, I've got my one-on-one with the team and it's important I have it, or I have a one-on-one with this person. It's really important I have it. Could we try this other time? Because they know that's what they're paying you to be and to do as a leader. Mm-hmm. So it's okay to push back. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move forward in the interest of time. If somebody has questions around one-on-ones or anything we've covered, feel free to put them in the chat. Go from there. So here's the thing. Look for the positives. Look for the green lights. Right? We do see the net red lights. We do know they exist. They're going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. But when you can catch somebody doing it right, way more encouraging. So what are your team's positives? Do you have a team that says, hey, we have culture? You know, Karen, back to your story. Hey, it's, you know, an hour and a half, which is a waste of time. But wow, it's nice that I have a culture where people feel that comfortable with each other. Now, the downside could be it's too cliquey. I don't know. So you kind of have to create a pros and cons of your team, and maybe a pros and cons of each rep on your team. Or maybe go to your team and say, hey, what are the pros and cons of our team? What are your pros and cons? To help them find their positive. Because most of the time, people will turn around and pick on the negative first. And you have to push them. I do role plays in my training. Go ahead, Mikey.
I'm very curious. How would you, I'm sorry if you might touch on this, but yeah, how do you approach the negatives as a leader?
Yeah, so here's an example. So I do role plays in my training, right? If you didn't know, I'm a sales trainer. And so every time I do a role play, I will say to the person, to the rep who's practicing the skill that I've taught, open-ended questions, mirroring, labeling, I'll say, hey, scale of 1 to 10, how do you think you did? And they'll always come back. It's almost all the time, 6.5, 7. And then I say, great, well, what's the difference between 6.5 and a 10? And now they're figuring it out. And I'm encouraging them to listen to themselves and their own internal voice versus me telling them what to do. I'll also go, by the way, hey, everybody, because it's usually a group, be like, hey, everybody, you know, was it a 6.5 or a 7? What do you guys think? 9 times out of 10, it's like a 7.5 to an 8.5. We critique ourselves so hard, so much, that I really want people to be aware of that. So you have to try to find the green lights. The quote, which I guess maybe isn't in here, is that the brain is Velcro for negativity and Teflon for positivity. We stick to the negatives all the time. Mikey, we were talking before this, you were a rugby player, right?
Sure was.
Do you remember more of the mistakes, or do you remember more of the good times?
It's a great point. More of the mistakes and more of the losses.
More of the lot, right. Now, do you remember the times, and I don't know what position you played, I don't know anything about rugby, but do you remember the times you scored?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And is it like, yes, or is it like, well, yeah, that was cool. Got a humble brag. Can't be too.
Honestly, the latter. It was more of like, great, I did it. Sweet. Let's move on.
Because we're so focused on this negativity. The brain is conditioned and wired this way. So, by the way, that's not, you can quote me, but some other doctor said it, so you can Google it if you're going to quote it. But yeah, Velcro and Teflon. So know what your positives are, right? Sometimes the positives, thank God it's fucking Friday and the week's over. I've sent that to my team many times, like, hey, we did not do well this week, but the good news is it's Friday. Like, everybody go out and have a good time. Right? Try to catch them doing it right. We're going to go into some examples of that in a second. And it's never too late for a compliment. Even if somebody closed the deal 2 months ago, it's okay for me to come up and say, Mikey, you know what? I made a mistake. You closed that huge deal 2 months ago. And man, that was awesome. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. Because Mikey's going to walk out of that room going, all right, I got a little recognition. It's never too late to give recognition, ever. Mm-hmm. In fact, I challenge every person on this call today, go to your team, find something that they haven't heard from you about, and say that. Say, hey, you know what? didn't mean to say something. It's gotten away from me. You did this really well. And I just want to let you know I'm aware of it and good job. See what happens. Right? They're going to go home and tell somebody that. That's a really cool thing.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
It's a great point. Because every time I get recognition, I tell somebody.
Yeah. And again, we all poo-poo it. Like, own your recognition. Say thank you when someone compliments you. Say thank you. I appreciate it. Because oftentimes we get the compliment like, our parents told us not to, brag. Right? It's like, well, there's nothing bragging about doing a job well. Now, there's a difference between pride and arrogance. We all know it. But own those pieces. All right, coaching tips. One challenge at a time, right? If someone's cold call pitch has a terrible opening, and then they're fumbling, and then they don't have a call to action, and then they're not doing X, Y, or Z, you can't make them fix it all at once. Have them do one thing at a time. And in my mind, you role play it 10 times with them. Okay, we're going to work on, instead of you saying hello, we're going to say, hey. So I'm going to say, okay, Mikey, kick it off. Mikey's going to go, hey, Richard. Okay, do it again, Mikey. Hey, Richard. Do it again, Mikey. Hey, Richard. And over time, it becomes more natural and authentic, right? Our goal as leaders, in my mind, is to get our reps and our teams to be their authentic self, right? You may hear nuggets from me and be like, I'm going to say it that way. I don't care. If that's your authentic self, go do it. But sometimes people don't say things the way Richard does, and that's okay. And maybe they shouldn't. It's all right. Personalize it, right? Make sure that you understand, hey, Sarah, I want to work with you on this. Just so I understand, what are you going to do next? I want to make sure that I was clear in my direction to you. Because Lord knows I have given terrible directions as a leader. So you check me, Sarah. Here's what my expectations are. What do you think that is? Because I want to make sure I'm not misleading you or not being detailed enough. So I'll throw myself, quote unquote, under the bus a little. So personalize that messaging and communication in that way. Right tone of voice. Pretend like you're lost. Hey, I'm confused. Can you help me understand? Hey, what's going on? Like, ask for directions, just like you would if you were lost in some New York City and you didn't have a cell phone with the map on it. Or giving directions. Hey, here's what I hope you can do. I'd love it if you could. Would it be possible for you to? And again, you're not being apologetic by asking them to do something. You're being authentic, you're being true, you're being direct, you're setting expectations, just working towards that pace and tone. Types of coaching. I think we're almost at the end. We're going to come back to that, Tanya. That's a great question, by the way. There are different types. Self-reliance, right? Mikey, you did that. Right? Mm-hmm. That's how you figured out how to get out and get promoted.
Exactly.
Right? Manager to rep, peer to peer, team session led by a manager, team session led by a rep, live call coaching, recording feedback. If there's something missing, please put it on here. Like these are the things I know of. As a sales leader, my job gets better when I have to do less of the coaching. That doesn't mean that I don't want to do coaching. I'm there to facilitate the coaching. I'm there to be additive to the coaching. But if I've got a team, I'm going to every one of my team members, hey, next week you're going to do 10 minutes on this, and the following week you're doing 10 minutes on that. Somebody else is doing it on that. Somebody's doing it on that. Somebody's doing it on that. Right? And particularly those who want to get promoted, great. Let's see how you do. Show us your chops, right? And it becomes a great coaching moment for you, not only for the team, but also for them. You can also get the team to give them feedback. Hey, what would have been better for Richard to do in that team session since it's the first time he's ever led one? That's what people want. So now all of a sudden, I'm just facilitating the conversation and the reps are having conversations. So, let's see. Any other questions in the Q&A? I'm not in the Q&A, but otherwise we'll jump because now we are at the end with 3 minutes. Okay. By the way, that's my real name, email address, Twitter. And by the way, yeah, that's my real cell phone number. If you text me right now, it'll come in. You know why I give out my number? Because nobody ever fucking calls. So, yes, it's being recorded. Yes, you'll get it. Yes, you'll get the deck, by the way. Do sales performance management platforms help managers build a high performance culture? And do they increase the perception of micromanaging and being tracked? Woo, good question, Tanya. I'm going to give you some answers, but I also want people, if you're still on, to give Tanya some answers. What do you think? Because I don't use this day in and day out. So I'll tell you what I think, but I think the peers are going to know more than I do. So, and by the way, everybody, did you see how I just took my leadership and handed it off to other people to give feedback so I can do less? So, do they help build a high performance culture? Depends on your definition of high performance culture, Tanya. So not that we have time today, but I would tell you to say high performance culture here means blank, blank, and blank. What do those things mean for you, Tanya, at your company, at your culture? And then for each one of those 3 bullets, what does that really mean? And what I'm trying to get you to think about, Tanya, is to think in use case scenario. I need the team to be better at blank, blank, and blank, not just discovery. Well, what do you mean? What kind of discovery? At what stage of the process, right? Whatever it is. So anyway, so that's one thing. So I think that's a piece of you defining what it is you want out of this tool. And it comes down to the execution of using the tool, and are you willing to do the hard work? So, and the key will be the setup. The key will be the onboarding of that tool or service and making sure it's dialed in the way you want. It's also a reason you need sales ops to help you. Does it increase the perception of micromanagement and being tracked? Well, I think it depends, right? If you're sitting here, call counts, emails sent, stuff like that, it might create that perception. On the other hand, you're trying to track to performance, and those things do drive performance. So you have to figure out where they are in those worlds. If there's a concern around micromanaging, then I think you need to have a question with your team. Maybe you ask the team, hey, everybody, what's wrong with using something like this? Because believe me, they're going to remember the negative faster. And don't say, hey, is it too much micromanaging? Don't ask them. Don't plant the seed, because they're all going to say yes at that point. Right? And then be able to present, well, what if we did it this way? Now, again, Tanya, I don't know what high performance means for you and your team. If people are not performing, right, and if they are not hitting goals and quota, then no, I don't think it's micromanaging. If you expect the tool to do it for you, that's when I have a problem, right? So for example, I can go and put, virus software on my kids' computers and adult content stuff, right? But one, it's still going to happen at some point. One of them's 13, the other one just turned 12. They're both boys. It's going to happen. They're going to see it. It's too easily accessible. But I can't blame the tool if the tool fails. I still have to be a father. I still have to be able to say, hey, you're probably going to see this one day. And when you do, I want you to come talk to me because I want to have a healthy conversation. Right? So it depends on how you're going to use the tool. And that's a really important piece. So explaining how the tool is supposed to help. And maybe that's how you started, Tanya. I'm going to go back. It's like, hey, everybody, I'm thinking of this tool. Here are the things I think it can help us. What are some of the things that other places it could help us, and where would it be a detriment? So plant the seeds of positivity. Anyway, we're 1 minute over. Happy to stay on for a second and take a question if people have them. But if not, I just want to say thank you so much. And thank you to Sales Hacker, and thanks to Outreach for having me.